Well, hello, good morning. It's Saturday the 16th of December and it's just gone 7:30 in the morning. I'm just setting out to do a 200-kilometre DIY. Absolutely love this time of the year, I really do. Winter's one of my favourite seasons to ride in. So I'm on my hybrid today. Feels safer on straight handlebars and wider tyres. So today's route, I'm actually copying the first 200-kilometre DIY I ever did in August 2014, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the route later on, and why I've chosen to ride it again. And also I mentioned on my last update for the Solstice 1200 why I jump between miles and kilometres quite often, and why I find it so easy to do that as well, and beneficial. So I'll maybe explain that later on, but I'm going to head off now. It's quite a steep drop down here, and I was aware of a bit of wheel spin coming up the hill, so I'm going to be taking this next descent quite steady. Well, it's now mid-morning and the sun's up. You may be able to tell by my long shadow and the fact that I'm squinting. It's actually a lovely day. I've just ridden through eastwards through the Pewsey Vale, and I'm now turning south-eastish, and I'm going to cross over some downs here at Oxenwood and then drop down into the Upper Bourne Valley. Before I start describing the route in more detail, maybe a little bit about the last couple of hours. It was very icy last night and the roads obviously hadn't been treated, so I took it quite gingerly coming through the Pewsey Vale. So maybe a little bit about how I sort of manage risk really. It's an approach I've learned from, well, I won't say what my source is, but I call it an all-weather approach. So, I mean, for instance, today you always think the chances of you going down in the ice are greater, so there's a greater risk of injury. But I like flip that. I would say actually I could well injure myself more in the summer because I'll have less layers of clothing on. So, and I may be more complacent in the summer as well. I'm more likely to be focused and concentrated. So by flipping it, it just allows me to manage the risk. It all boils down really to knowing the difference between risk aversion and risk awareness. So risk awareness is when you think of the worst case scenario, how you can minimise the chances of that happening. That may even be turning around and going home. But you're always hoping for the best, prepared for the worst. The chances are it'll be somewhere along that spectrum. So it's now about midday and I'm in the Bourne Valley heading southeast. Basically today's route is coming out from Bath in a southeasterly direction. I'm doing a big loop around the city of Andover without ever going into it. So I'm following the Bourne Valley at the moment, then I'm about to join the Upper Test Valley, and then as I start heading westwards and doing my turn, I'll be in the Dun Valley towards Salisbury, and then as I then head, it's going to be northwestish back up to Bath. I'll be following the Wiley Valley, so 4 valleys. And this route is based on a 300-kilometre event I used to organise for the All That's UK calendar back in the late 90s, I think, and it's called the 4 Valleys 300. So it used to go a bit further. It would loop down to the Itchen Valley, skirt around Winchester again without ever going into Winchester. So as I mentioned earlier on, this is the first 200-kilometre DIY I ever organised myself and entered back in August 2014. It seems ages ago. So I've been a bit busy really with other things, and I've been spending my evenings going through some of my old routes and constructing new ones, and I came across this one. It brought back all these memories. That's my first one. It was actually quite a nice route actually, and I wanted to ride it again. So there's another reason for wanting to ride this route today. When I first started cycling, I was really keen to explore, and so I actually fell in love with all this sort of scenery many years ago, and I always get the thrill of coming back, so it just reminds me of why I love cycling. Another thing I remember from those days was putting little pieces together and extended my adventures. I mean, for example, I remember me and a colleague, neither of us had cars, so we got a train up to Gloucester to do a course. And I remember sort of seeing some cyclists getting on the train and thinking, oh, I didn't know you could take your bikes on trains. I just didn't know, simple as that. In those days, there were guards vans. It was quite a simple process to do. And on that train journey back, I thought, I'll investigate that, taking my bicycle on the train, because I could actually go further using the train. And I suddenly remembered this conversation I'd heard in a pub some months before. There's a couple of guys saying they'd been to London, I think, to a concert, and one of them had gone on a student rail card, and his mates were sort of saying, but you're not a student. He said, they're widely known as student rail cards, but actually if you read the small print it says under 23. And I remember I investigated that as well, and I had an under 23 rail card, and that taught me another lesson. Never take things at face value, always look at the detail. I combined the under 23 rail card with my cycle touring, and I went to some fantastic places. So I've now crossed over into Test Valley. It's one of my favourites, it really is. My early days of cycling, one of my big heroes was a guy called Nick Sanders, who was an expedition cyclist, I guess what you call a bike packer these days, and he did some quite amazing adventures, and one of his books that I've got was he cycled to the source of the Nile. And that inspired me actually, because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I copied him in effect, but flipped it, and I started tracing these rivers on a map to their source, and then working out routes that would follow them as closely as possible down to the sea. And yeah, okay, it wasn't as grand as the Nile, but it taught me a lot about map reading and logistics and how to plan and basically what to do when things went wrong. It's quite an education actually. I'm a great believer in that now. There's nothing wrong with copying, or being inspired by, as they say, because you're never going to copy something 100%. You're going to always put your own mark on it, but you can learn from people who've done things that you haven't done.
And what have I learned from all this?
I just stopped off at Stockbridge in the Test Valley. It's one of my favourite places down in Hampshire. So it's just gone 4 p.m. I've just passed through busy Salisbury. I've just turned right at Wilton. Now I'm heading up about 20 miles parallel to the Wylye Valley, the last of my rivers for today. So I did say at the start of this video, and at the end of the previous video as well, I'd maybe explain why I've flipped between miles and kilometres quite often. It was only when I was editing a video recently I thought it must look a bit confusing, but there is a reason, so let me try and explain. So externally I can actually gauge miles on the road much easier, but then with the metric system that Audax requires, it's all based on the kilometre format, so you need to be able to use both just to enter the distances, but I do flick through a lot. The actual conversions come quite easily to me, and I think the reason for that is about 8 or 9 years of age at primary school we spent an awful lot of time getting ready for the upcoming decimalisation in 1971, and I still remember a lot of those conversions even to this day. I mean, for instance, 6pence was 2.5 pence, a shilling was 5 pence, 10 bob was 50 pence, a pound was a pound. But what I have found is people tend to either prefer one or the other, and sometimes they get quite passionate and almost argumentative about it, and I avoid getting any sort of silo or rigid sort of thinking like that, because it can lead you up dead ends. And I mean, we're sort of almost primed to react to anybody who disagrees with us or has a different opinion. We go into conflict mode. The fight or flight gets activated. It starts releasing all the stress hormones, and they're not really good for you. I mean, they're to save your life in emergencies. You shouldn't be getting, you shouldn't be activating that on a regular basis. It's pretty unhealthy, and I witness it quite a lot. People sort of get almost into tribes, and they just will not accept the other point of view. The two distances help me to sort of think almost like in a different language, and it gives you that advantage. Yeah, it sort of helps keep me in that open mode. It's like the old one about there's a researcher doing a survey on change in social attitudes, and he approaches an old soldier and, amongst other things, asks when the last time he had sex was, and he replies 1958, and the researcher says, gosh, that's a long time ago, and he said, not really, it's only 2000 hours now. And whether you find that funny or not, there is a very serious point there, and that's quite a good metaphor. Yeah, I love this time, all the lights on the houses and the decorations. It really does lift my spirit actually while I'm cycling. Well, it's 10 to 8 now, and I've just pulled into the Hope and Anchor car park and just about to get on the 2 tunnels route. It's about 3¼ miles back to my house in my dead flat. It's been a fantastic day. I've really enjoyed riding this route again. It's so different to when I did it last time. The route's slightly different, but the actual atmosphere, because last time was in midsummer and this time midwinter, just been completely different. Really enjoyed it. So maybe just a little bit about the next video. I sort of identified a problem on a couple of the long rides I did, the Lindisfarne 1400 and then a couple of 400s I did last year. Sort of asked around, sort of like took some advice from a really experienced rider, someone whose opinion I value very much. And Linda's been and bought me a bit of kit for Christmas. It's not bike kit, it's an accessory. So I hope it's going to solve the problem. It may not, I don't know. If you don't try things, you'll never find out. So I may review that soon after Christmas actually. So thanks very much for watching and until next time.